This is Geek Gab with your hosts, Dorrinal and me, Daddy Warpig. We are back. Geek Gab for Saturday, July 13th, 2019. Can you believe this year is almost halfway? Is over halfway through?
It's incredible. Time flies when you're streaming.
I wish I had something deep and profound to say at this point upon the nature of time and the fleeting consequences thereof, but I don't. Except that, man, that went by fast.
Yeah, sure did. It's summer out of nowhere.
And I've only seen like 3 movies this year in the last 6 months.
Hey, that's normal, right?
No, 4. I've seen 4 movies. I've seen the 3 Marvels and John Wick. Because how could you miss John Wick?
Yeah. Nope. That's
And
normal. Movies are like a second half of the year sort of thing, right? They start with the summer blockbusters and
I mean, I feel kind of lucky because 3 of those 4 movies were good. So,
that's Hollywood for you. That's lucky.
Yeah, but I'm thinking, man, we haven't done a lot of movie shows. It's because we haven't been going to a lot of movies. Have we talked about movies that you've seen that I didn't see?
No. No, I haven't seen any movies either.
I've been racking my brain trying to think of what we have talked about, and I can't remember any of it.
Well, we've got a whole list of episodes on YouTube you can go back to. But yeah, it's actually, I think I said this last week on the show. It's becoming harder and harder to talk geek culture, pop culture, because there's less and less of it worth consuming, to be frank.
Oh, dude. I made a big mistake yesterday and today.
Oh no. You didn't go to Taco Bell, did you?
No. I watched a TV show from the 70s.
Did you? And a real one, not that 70s show, which is a TV show from the 2000s.
Yeah, no, a real 70s show. It's called Black Sheep Squadron. It's about a bunch of Marine pilots in World War II.
Okay. But that's a strange name. Is it like a satire or a comedy or? Or did we lose Daddy Warpig's mic altogether? I think that's what happened. I can't wait to find out more. Let me look this up on IMDb. Black Sheep Squadron, 1976. No, looks like they're playing this one straight. I'll read the description here while we enjoy some technical difficulties. Bradford Walker in the chat, he loves it. This is great. I've never heard of this, but everybody loves this stuff. It is the dramatized World War II adventures of U.S. Major Gregory Pappy Boyington and his U.S. Marine Attack Squadron 214, the Black Sheep Squadron. Now, looks like it only went 2 seasons. That's not a great sign, guys. That's not a great sign at all. Daddy Warpig has officially left the chat. Well, we'll have to get back to Black Sheep Squadron in a second. Well, I'll tell you something that I watched online. I caught an episode of a new-ish series based on an older book called Good Omens. Have you guys seen that? Maybe not. It's an old story by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, and the setup has potential. It's the end of the world. The Antichrist has been born, and the main characters are a demon and an angel who decide that they kind of like the place, so they're going to try to prevent the end of the world from happening. It's got a bunch of great guest stars in it, like John Hamm is the Archangel Gabriel, and Michael McKean's in there too. So it sounds like a great setup. I hate to say it, but I just didn't laugh enough through the series. It's obviously meant to be a comedy. You know, the angel and the demon are pretty bungling, right? They've been stuck on Earth for centuries, and they've gotten to like humanity, and hilarity's supposed to ensue, but maybe it's that dry British humor that just doesn't click with me. I wasn't a big fan of it. Also, if you're the type who's frustrated with general that sort of attitude that's typical for Neil Gaiman or Terry Pratchett, that sort of whimsical treatment of religion or Christianity, that sort of thing, you'd be frustrated by this show as well. It didn't bother me so much, but I could see where maybe their theology is not correct, or they don't have the Bible correct, that sort of thing, or they're just treating it with irreverence, without good effect, right? Like if you're gonna send up those tropes and features of Christianity, at least make it funny, at least make it entertaining. It didn't bother me too much. I just thought it wasn't very funny. Let me see if everything's okay with Daddy Warpig. All right, folks, I'm going to go on commercial break and see if I can get this thing up and running again. Unlike Daddy Warpig, I can't rant for 2 hours. Well, I got no response from Daddy Warpig. I think we're going to assume that there's been catastrophic technical failures. We may have to restart this up at a later date.
I'm back.
What?
I'm back.
Just as I was giving up on life, you saved it. Were you listening live?
No. We had a power spike here, so
That's incredible. It had to have been something like that.
the internet went. Can we really be blamed for that? Is that even a technical problem for the show? If like it isn't even. That has nothing to do with us, nothing to do with our computers. It's entirely the problem of the city's power grid.
It's still part of the Geek Gab. Our reach extends far out. I was just talking to myself and Brad Walker in chat about good omens while we were waiting.
I'm gonna go close my door now that everything's back up. Be right back.
All right.
Ugh.
So I just come to the horrible realization over the past few minutes.
All right, I'm back.
Did you hear the horrible realization I came to?
No, I didn't. What was the horrible realization?
I just realized that if I had to do the show myself, I would have nothing to say.
Oh, 'cause you haven't done anything this week?
Yeah.
So
no, we were talking about since we were talking about streaming shows, we were talking about Good Omens.
Yeah, I watched that.
Oh, you did. You did. I watched the first episode. I was just explaining. I'll give you the short version. The casting was really cool, but the first episode I didn't think was very funny, so I did not choose to pursue it any further. What did you think?
Several people I know liked it. I was not a big fan. As with several streaming servicey things, they're coming out of big tech from Silicon Valley, and so they're putting the requisite bizarrely woke spin on stuff that just isn't in the original material and doesn't really need to be there.
No, I'm not familiar. The original is a book written by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, so I had very high expectations for the quality of the material. I'm guessing the jokes that landed were written by them, and everything that I didn't like was added by someone at Amazon.
I can confirm, having read the book like 4 or 5 times, I can confirm that the jokes that really worked were by and large Gaiman and Pratchett's material. The jokes that didn't work were Amazon add-ins, and there was way too much of them, and a lot of them weren't necessary. I mean, the original material, a lot of times when you're adapting a work, you can look at a joke and tell, hey, you know what? That was necessary. It was necessary. You had to go off and kind of do that differently there, so you understand that completely makes sense. But a lot of times in this material, there were things that were taken out that didn't need to be taken out. There were things that were left in that should have been taken out. And then there's a lot of things that were put in that just didn't need to be there. Jokes or ideas, like, for example, in the climax of the book, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, death, famine, war, and pollution. Pestilence retired after the discovery of penicillin. So the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse meet up in a club in England. A pub in England. And they also meet 4 biker toughs, 4 thug bikers. And the 4 thug bikers decide to ride along with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse and they decide to become the 4 lesser horsemen of the apocalypse. And so rather than war and death and famine and pollution, they choose different names like grievous bodily harm. Because
that's cute.
So it's an amusing sequence, and I really enjoyed it. But it would add a lot of time to the show and not necessarily add a lot of humor to the show, so they left it out. I get that. Maybe I might have liked to see it, but I get why they left it out.
Sure. Although, interestingly enough, I'd like to know how much is meddling, because I have just confirmed on IMDb that Neil Gaiman actually wrote the script for the miniseries.
Did he really?
Yeah. So I think perhaps many of those decisions were his.
Huh.
So there you go. Pokes a hole right in your theory. Balloon deflated.
No, it just means that, I mean, they wrote this book like 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
I
more.
think that's about right.
It just means that the Neil Gaiman of 20 years ago made better decisions about this book than the Neil Gaiman of today did, which is absolutely possible. When writers go back and revisit work that's 20 years old, very often they make bad decisions about the material.
One of the things that really worked for me was John Hamm as Gabriel. I thought that was a great casting, and at least in the first episode, the character's great. Just the total, alpha jock guy going, yeah, I'm not putting up with your nonsense.
I loved the book the first time I read it, and it is one of those books that is, it kind of wore out its welcome the more I've read it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the first time I read it, I absolutely loved it.
Oh, great. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the show, even if it wasn't perfect. I'm glad that, because I didn't like it enough to continue, but I never read the book.
If I didn't like it at the end, I mean, at the end, I had kind of a negative impression of the show, but even knowing that, I would have still watched it because I did like the book so much, and I've read it several times over the course of however long it's been since I bought it. I was stuck downtown in Salt Lake City waiting for a bus. And so I wandered into a bookstore on the corner of a building. I think it was a Deseret Book here in Salt Lake. And I wandered in and looked at some books, and I saw a book called Good Omens by Gaiman and Pratchett. And I bought it because it looked interesting. And this would have been less than 15 years ago. So in that time, I've read it several times. I've really enjoyed it a lot. And so I would have watched this again, even if I had known that people gave it kind of a bad review, just because I wanted to see it.
Yeah, that's fair.
So it was one of those things. But yeah.
Well, you had our audience really excited about Black Sheep Squadron.
Yeah, I was doing a bit. So
the power loss ate your bit. I think in the first time in the history of Geek Gab, I may have to go back and actually edit the episode.
Yeah,
because that's going to be real awkward to listen to later.
Just stop talking. Just bam. Okay. Here's the thing. Do it straight without the bit. The fact is, I watched the first 3 episodes of Black Sheep Squadron. And they were just so darn fun. They were entertaining. They were meant to be entertaining. They didn't have any awkward, stilted dialogue where they were trying to talk around social issues, or, they had female nurses in the show, and they weren't trying to respect the women, and they just didn't have any political correctness. And it was just pure entertainment. And again and again and again, I'm thinking as I'm watching these episodes, two things. The first one is that this is absolutely the perfect setup to a TV series, to a drama dash comedy series, a dramatic series with a little bit of comedy thrown in. And this series should have been a major hit. The material was there, the actors were there. They just missed a bit on the execution, at least for the first 3 episodes. And I hope to watch, seasons 1 and 2, and so I can report back on those probably on Twitter or whatever. And if they made it just a little bit tighter, if they had edited it so the jokes landed just a little bit harder, it was nearly perfect. Just absolutely entertaining. And it had the perfect setup to be an entertaining show. And this is one of those shows that should have lasted for like 8 or 9 seasons. Should have been a perennial. They canceled it after 3 seasons. And one of the reasons why they canceled it, is because its original name was awful, just terrible. Its original name was Baba Black Sheep.
Oh, no.
And they could have called it the perfect name, which would have been Boynton's Black Sheep. Now, you're going to say, that sounds awful.
That would have worked a little better.
The reason why Boynton's Black Sheep would have been great is because Major Boynton was a Medal of Honor award winner. He was a World War II war hero, a combat veteran. His squadron, the Black Sheep, were all legitimate war heroes. During the time they were active in the South Pacific, they were the #1 squadron in the Marines. So, and this is in the 1970s, right? So it was just 30 years after the war. So everybody knew him or had heard his name.
Oh.
It's like 40 years later now. But back then, people knew who Boynton was. They kind of knew who the Black Sheep were. He was part of the common knowledge. Like, so it would have been a little bit more topical. It would have been a little bit more evocative. And I think that would have grabbed people more than Baba Black Sheep. I think that's a terrible, terrible name.
Yeah, that's a bad name.
Black Sheep Squadron it is better, but still not strong enough. So I get the people who would say, oh yeah, Boynton is kind of a, pain in the rear to say, but it's got name recognition, and that's all you need. So here's the thing about the show. This is what makes it great, is the premise is just mind-bogglingly awesome. Boynton, right before World War II began, when the Japanese were attacking mainland China, the Chinese were paying for a bunch of American fighter pilots. So America wasn't in the war yet. but a bunch of Americans were in China defending them from Japanese bombers. And they were mercenaries.
Yeah.
They got paid $500 for every zero they shot down. Well, Boyington was, he had kind of a bad attitude. He was insubordinate. He was a huckster, had been in his entire life, and he was part of these mercenaries. And the general who was in charge, he shot down 5 zeros. So he became an ace, one of the first American aces in World War II, before the war began. But the general said $2,500. The general refused to pay him. So he stole a plane and went to fly to Calcutta. Because in Calcutta, he had a commission to major waiting for him. He could get back into the Marine Corps at the rank of major, had been signed off by Admiral Nimitz. He's flying to Calcutta, and a couple of zeros, 2 zeros, jump him, and he fights them off. He shoots one down and unfortunately uses up the last of his gas. So he's forced to land and abandon this plane that he was going to sell in order to get the money back.
Oh, geez.
So he landed in this Indian's field in the middle of their farm. They stick him on a truck, drag him into Calcutta, and he's told that he's only going to be a second lieutenant. And he's never, ever, ever going to see combat again. So, through a series of deft maneuvers and con jobs and lying and faking paperwork and misappropriating paperwork, he assembles a group of 20 pilots, all of whom were up for court-martial for drunken disorderly, assaulting an officer, stealing scotch, various other criminal offenses. He assembles this group of pilots, takes another group of pilots and gets them put into quarantine for 2 weeks, gets all of their planes transferred. Now, this is real. This really happened in the real war, World War II. Transfers them to an island, gets his commission back as a major, gets his pilot, gets his pilots moved to this island, and creates his own squadron and begins hunting zeros.
That's amazing.
In their first and so he has 2 weeks, the 2 weeks until those pilots get out of quarantine, to actually put some kills on the board so they will know that he can do the job. This other pilots who had it, they'd been for the previous 3 months in combat, they'd had 0 kills and 6 planes shot down. 6 of their own planes had been shot down.
Oh.
So he has his superior officer, the colonel, hates him and screws him over at every opportunity. The general who's above that colonel likes him and is willing to help him out now and then. But he has to produce. So he goes up in 4 planes and flies in a V formation. He's forbidden to go and escort bombers because escorting bombers would let him get kills, and the colonel doesn't want him to get kills. So he says nobody lets him do it. So he goes flying up in the air in the formation of bombers and then simulates the radio traffic of a bombing wing, and the Japanese take the bait.
Just so he could shoot him down and make some money?
No. He can't make money anymore because he's in the Marine Corps.
Oh, sure.
He's not a mercenary. He's in the Marine Corps. But just so he can get some kills on the board, so he can show, the brass, hey, look, we're good pilots. We've got a good squadron here. So they send up a bunch of planes. And again, this is true. This really happened. In their first combat encounter, they shot down 18 Zeros and didn't take a single casualty.
Wow. So they were good. They were really good.
They were actually good, yeah.
They were just, bad people on the ground.
Yeah, they were misfits. That's why they're called the Black Sheep.
That's right. There's those sorts of loose cannons that you just point towards your enemy and hope.
And hope, yeah. So they're on this island that has like a 3/4 completed runway. On the other side of the island is a hospital with 30 nurses.
Okay.
They are misfits, all of whom were up for court-martial before Boynton denied all the court-martials. And he conned his way into command of a squadron. He was supposed to be a major, and they were going to not let him be it, but he conned his way back into being a major. And he conned his way into racking up kills on the Japanese. His boss hates him, but his boss's boss likes him.
That all seems reasonable.
And yeah, that is such a glorious setup for drama, such a glorious setup for comedy, such a glorious setup. Just that situation, the way it's put together, is brilliant. That is a story engine. And should I go into the mechanics of that as to why it's so brilliant?
I mean, it seems clear to me. You've got a bunch of characters with motivations that are at odds with each other. You can write 100 stories a year on that. That sounds great.
Yeah. And his guys are screw-ups on the ground. Just like you said, they're screw-ups on the ground. In the air, they're actually good at their job.
So if you need a complication for your story, boom, somebody screws up.
Somebody does, yeah. Somebody decides to get angry and punch an MP. Somebody, decides to go off and try to romance one of the nurses, whatever. So many things that you can do in that situation. I mean, it's just brilliant how they set it up. And like the second movie, or the second episode, the first two episodes were the pilot. That was all the conning and stuff. The man cheated and conned and lied his way into command of a Marine fighter squadron.
What's great about that is most of the liars and con men use all their abilities to get out of combat.
Yeah.
They would like to avoid getting shot at. This guy used all of his tools of deceit to get himself a squadron of fighter pilots.
So they don't let people be fighter pilots at this time in the Pacific. Apparently, they didn't want people being fighter pilots after the age of 25 because your reflexes slow down.
Sure.
But he was 35, and he was a better pilot than anybody else younger than him.
Wow.
So all the people in his squadron started calling him Grandpa. Or Pappy, and that was his call sign from then on out, which was Pappy for Grandpappy.
That's great.
But yeah, there's just so much, and if you want something good or bad to happen, a stranger comes and lands on the island. Maybe it's someone from the brass making trouble, or maybe it's just a visitor, or a big bunch of Zeros comes over, or the Japs attempt a landing. In an hour episode, you can fit so many fun things. In the second episode, the colonel who hates him cuts off all his supplies. and he can't fly without fuel. He can't shoot things down without bullets. And if he's not combat active for 2 weeks, they get thrown in the brig, whether it's, supplies or not. They're a combat unit who's not engaged in combat. That's it. So he finds the reg that says, hey, if they're on R&R, it doesn't count. Okay. So while they're off on R&R, the guy who he stole the planes from, the other major and his pilots, get sent to the island to take over the squadron again and fly it out. Wow. Only when they get to the island, Boynton has pulled the critical piece that every plane needs to fly out of the engine. It's just a beautiful setup. And then they executed it really well. And they've got a lot of great actors of the time in it. And it was just so much fun. It wasn't, it wasn't preachy. It wasn't dull and pedantic and plotting. They didn't stop and say, well, if you think about it, man, the real enemy is us. It just,
yeah,
it's
no
pure.
revisionism there. It's just fun, just a real story about what happened.
And I'm looking at it and thinking, man, when did entertainment stop being just fun? To where even entertainment that doesn't like push politics or whatever is still kind of stilted, is still tap dancing around all these social issues. I'm not saying everyone's wrong about social issues or whatever, but entertainment is literally the worst place in the world to try and force feed the right answers to people. Because you make crappy entertainment. This is a show that got canceled after 3 seasons.
Right. This is the bad show. This is one of the bad shows from that era.
And it's just brilliant. So I don't know. I loved the hell out of the first, and I'm not saying they're absolutely perfect. They've got their flaws here and there, but it also, some of it, I think, some of it is the fact that as I've gotten older and older and editing is sped up, I've gotten used to a higher pace of editing. Like we were just mentioning John Wick, and if you're used to that kind of frenetic pace, it's a little bit harder to go back to a slower paced movie. But that's not a knock on Black Sheep Squadron. It just means that I need to adjust to that when I watch the show. It's like, okay, this is a little bit slower. It's not their fault. They're not doing anything wrong. That's what it's supposed to be, and that's the time it came from. But I enjoyed the hell out of watching both of those episodes.
Love it.
So, man, I wish the show had gone to 7 seasons, because they certainly had the setup and the actors to do it. And I wish we still had the same sense of fun and enjoyment that these guys who made this did. I mean, entertainment is supposed to lift your burdens. It's supposed to make you feel good. It's supposed to, entertain you. It's supposed to lighten your load. It's not supposed to add to the things that you need to worry about. It's not supposed to add to the things that
that
is awful.
That's a shame. So speaking of newer stuff, did the latest season of Stranger Things meet your bars? Was it entertaining?
The latest season of Stranger Things is actually better than the first two seasons.
Wow, I did not expect to hear that. I'm
Neither did
floored.
I.
I sincerely, I did not expect you to say that.
No, neither did I.
Wow. I would like to hear more. I would like to subscribe to your podcast. Oh, no. Shoot, I'm on it. Dang it.
I am legitimately surprised that they did much better with this season. I don't know, and I didn't check, and I'm not going to check. I don't know if they cut out a couple of episodes, and so they didn't have to stretch it as long, or if they just got better at finding things for characters to do that were actually interesting and yet integral to the plot. But they did it. And pretty much the plot held together. And they stopped for a brief period right before the final climax and say, this is what happened, so the audience knows. And it makes sense. Within the universe they've set up, you're like, oh, yeah, that all makes sense. I can see how this and this and that happens. So I don't want to spoil any of it because it's just so. If you liked Stranger Things, if you enjoyed them, you will really enjoy this season.
That's great to hear. I loved the first season. The nostalgia, the fun synth opening theme, and the weird setting. I pretty much liked all of the first season, and the second, which let me watch the second season. I think as pretty universally thought of as not as good, but
yeah,
it was. Yeah, the first season at least was a really cool show.
This season is set in 1985. At one point, they go to see. Call back to an earlier episode on this show. They go to see Dawn of the Dead, George Romero's Dawn of the Dead in the theater, which is pretty cool.
Uh-huh.
And they also go to see Back to the Future. So you get footage from both of those films, and it's a nice bit of nostalgia. One of the chicks that's on the show, one of the main characters, is Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman's daughter. Which I didn't know there was such a person to have existed before now. I don't know how I missed the existence of this person for like 20 years, or 18 years or whatever, but apparently that's a real person.
Really?
Huh. Yes. There were for people who are in the general circles that I travel in now, there are going to be some things about the show that will probably irritate them, and that's fine. I understand that, and I'm not saying that's bad or whatever, but the show is entertaining, and they've got some real bad guys in the show who are actual bad guys who are not like. They're not the usual bad guys you expect nowadays.
Okay.
That's kind of a nice change of pace. I'm trying to think of anything that I can say to make it
without spoiling it.
Yeah, without spoiling it. Because there are just some things that I think that when you hit them, there'll be pleasant surprises, and you'll be like, "Oh, that's cool." You get a little jolt of pleasure. I don't want to nab that away from you. I'm not saying these are big, M. Night Shyamalan plot twists. I will say for most of the show, Hopper, he's the David, what's his name, who was the new Hellboy. Is that right? Mike Mignola's comic, Hell.
Don't know that one.
Oh, man. Guillermo del Toro did 2 movies with him. Or did 2 movies about this character. I can't remember it now. Anyways, he plays the sheriff, right? The big guy who's perpetually unshaven, who became 11's adopted father.
Right.
He's just insufferable most of the show, but he gets a redemptive moment at one point in the show, and that's actually kind of nice.
Oh, that's an interesting change. In the first season in particular, he's the only competent person in the show.
Yeah.
It's really nice to. Yeah, every time his character showed up, everything pretty much got better.
The character really needed to learn either a Mozambique drill or 2 to the chest, face gets the rest. That would have solved a big problem way early on.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, somebody says of one of the bad guys, he's basically Arnold Schwarzenegger, and they're not lying. When you hear that line, I don't think they emphasize that line enough. I don't think they hit that hard enough. The character is basically an Arnold Schwarzenegger, or what you would expect Arnold Schwarzenegger to play. He's big, he's tough, he's muscly, he is apparently almost impervious to pain. He is just almost unstoppable. He's very scary.
Perfect. I like it when Arnold is the villain.
I enjoyed the show. It was a lot of fun. It's only 10 episodes. And it did drag a bit in certain places, but they didn't have any filler episodes.
Cool.
There were no episodes where they just sat down and marked time for an entire hour. Every single episode moves the stories forward. And there's like 3 separate threads that run through the series that sometimes cross, but mostly stay separate until the end when they all come together right before the climax. I tell you how much I like the show. This is a good example. I always watch television on my computer to my right, or I'm playing video games on my TV in front of me. And so I'll be listening to characters talk and sound effects and stuff, and occasionally looking over to watch the show. The visuals were so great, and I was enjoying the show so much that I stopped playing my video games and turned on Netflix on my TV and watched it there.
Wow.
On my TV. And I almost never do that.
You had to give it your undivided attention.
Yes.
Hey, so personal question. Do we have your undivided attention right now? Is this Gab that important to you?
I've never played video games during the Gab.
Oh, that's great to hear. That's great to hear.
Ever.
I'd hate to know that at any point in the past we've received anything less than the full Warpig.
So yeah, I did enjoy it. And if you like Stranger Things, you'll definitely like this season. It's a step up. The story is solid. They did a really good job. I was impressed.
Well, cool. Maybe I'll have to do what most people do and get Netflix for a month so I can watch that show. Because I did like the first 2 seasons.
Now, let me ask you a question. Did you know that the 3rd season of The Man in the High Castle was out?
No, I hadn't even heard of it. They haven't They haven't. Last season they advertised it everywhere, and this time I didn't even hear about it.
I haven't watched it, but it's been out for like almost 2 years now.
Seriously?
Yeah. I've been meaning to watch it. I keep on wanting to watch it, but
I think I got 2 episodes into the second season. I started the second episode, and when I realized that it was just going to drag for 13 hours, I quit. There's no reason to watch that show.
It's unfortunate because whether it sticks close to the source material or not, it is a killer premise that I think is kind of being squandered.
Absolutely. You were talking earlier about the Black Sheep Squadron and how the setting and the characters created a perfect situation for a comedy, a situation comedy, or action and drama, right?
Yeah.
The Man in the High Castle has the perfect science fiction escapist setup. You've got alternate realities, alternate histories, and that are interacting with each other, and you get to view a time in the past, a time period in the past, through a different lens, and you get to sort of explore what might come out of those changes, what might the world look like, and that's a great premise. You can have, maybe it's a little navel gazing, but you can have lots of cool ideas come out of that, and replay conflicts in different ways.
Well, and the part I loved the most was like when one character would see themselves in these movies and they were almost completely different, or they would learn secrets about another character in the movies. You could do so much stuff with that.
Mm.
Oh.
Yeah, the writers didn't know what they were doing. Like they knew they wrote a story, but they didn't do they didn't do the correct pacing. They didn't do it episodic. They tried to write, a 13-hour movie. The characters, there were too many characters that didn't hold interest. Yeah, they really, yeah, they messed up on that one. That's too bad.
See, here's the thing that it's something I've noticed about the best fantasy and sci-fi movies, and it's something that is a firm guideline of mine, almost an article of faith. Almost an article of faith. I've written this down in my list of rules. If you come up with a cool concept and you're going to write a story that involves this cool concept, you need to exploit the hell out of your concept. You need to not just use it kind of, casually or just superficially, just a little bit shallowly. You need to get into your concept, think about ways you can really use it, find one great way of using it, and then find a different great way of using it that'll surprise the audience, and find another great way of using it, and keep on digging until there's nothing left. Just so, because, man, nothing will thrill an audience more than having a great concept that keeps on coming back to them in new and entertaining in different ways over the course of a TV series or over the course of a movie. And I will say this: Sliders may have gotten terrible in the last couple of seasons, but they really tried their hardest to exploit that concept.
Wow, that's a show I haven't heard of in a long time. Yeah, they started off real strong, and they just, alternate reality of the week, go.
Yeah.
You can't miss with the concept like that.
So and they tried to exploit it. I mean, sure, some of the shows were kind of dumb. Some of the episodes were kind of dumb. I admit that. And then once they got into the photocopy of the week, where they just find whatever movie was popular and make an episode basically copying it, that was when the show went downhill. But they had at one point Neanderthals who had survived, and they had formed a big army and were invading other worlds because they had sliding technology too. Okay, that's really bizarre. But yeah, that's exploiting the hell out of your at least you're working hard to come up with new ideas. Maybe that's a good idea, maybe that's not, but you're doing the thinking, the kind of thinking you need to do to exploit that idea.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. It's really sad that Man in the High Castle didn't.
That's okay. Nothing lasts forever, especially not TV shows.
So do oh man, do we want to call it for today?
I think we've spent all the terrible TV shows we've watched lately.
And the great ones.
Yeah.
I tell you what, when I get off the show here, I'm going to go back and watch another episode of Black Sheep Squadron, man. If they keep up this quality, it's just so awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look into that. That sounds really great. And Stranger Things as well. Thanks for giving us your expert review.
Yeah. I sincerely was shocked how good it was.
Cool. Well, I'm done for today. It was always great to chat with you about the new stuff and the old stuff. Would you ever so kindly send us off?
All right. I want to thank, despite the very, very short notice everybody had, I want to thank Brad for coming in and joining in the chat and participating. And we also want to thank Gwen for jumping in right at the end. Sorry, we're on our way out, but we are. But if you really want to know, Stranger Things Season 3 we thought was good. Man in the High Castle Season 2 was not good. And I am a big fan so far of the 1970s World War II show Black Sheep Squadron, about a fighter pilot squadron full of misfits, black sheep, and fighting in the Southern Pacific. And I'm loving the heck out of that. So by all means, check it out, folks. Thanks to everybody who's going to be listening to this later or on iDevices or Android devices. We're available on youtube.com/geekgab. That's again, youtube.com/geekgab. We're available on the iTunes Store. We're available on the Google Play Store, and we're available on soundcloud.com. Just do a search for Geek Gab, and you can find us in all those places. You can listen to us on the internet, or you can download it and listen on the device of your choice. Also, we do this show about once a week, about the same time here on Saturdays. So if you want to listen live and join in the live chat, by all means, we welcome the participation. We are leaving you for today. But don't you worry. Don't you fret. We will be back.